I am live. I promised myself a chapter a day. I haven't quite managed, but almost. I'm reading Eyes of Horus. It plays 3,500 years BC, and it is a life of Joan Marshal Grants. She is Ra here. He is the son of a priestess of Ra and an heir of the Nomarch of the Oryx. Joan Grant was a writer of her own far memories, and this is one of her books, and I am now here in the second part, and I think it's chapter 6, I think, of the second part. Let me see. The Blue Death, chapter 6 of part 2. I'll make this a bit quieter, it's a bit too loud. Like a bit of music in the background. The Blue Death. The summer of the following year was the hottest I had ever known. I did not see Kias very often, but I noticed that even she who loved the heat had lost a little of her intense vitality. A pestilence born of the heat and the stagnant river had broken out in many parts of Egypt. As yet it had passed by the Oryx, but daily it grew nearer. When I heard there were 30 dead in a village less than a day's journey from the northern boundary, I decided to go to consult Father as to what preparation we should make against its onslaught. In the old days, it would have been the priests who combated this enemy of Egypt. They would have given healing to the sick and to their temple people who had no one to care for them. What? In the old days, it would have been the priests who combated this enemy of Egypt. They would have given healing to the sick and to their temple's people who had no one to care for them would have been taken. But now, except in the Oryx, temples held no comfort for the afflicted. I had heard that the false priests were telling their followers that the pestilence had come as a sign of Set's anger, and that divine favor could only be regained by still heavier tribute, and the promise of yet more. I had heard also that human sacrifice was being made to the river, and though the priests still pretended that it was being done without their sanction, this was believed only by the most credulous. I thought of what Dardus had told me and knew how fear must be increasing from village to village. I tried by every means in my power to cross the river beyond the mist, so that I might ask the voice of Anubis how I could protect the Oryx. But I woke with no clear memory except a strong desire to talk it over with Kias. When I reached home, I found that Father was working with his scribe, so without disturbing him, I went to find her. Before I told her, she knew I had come about the pestilence. She said, "Roden sends me news of the pestilence every day. The people on his estate seem to have relatives in almost every nome. That's why he knows so much of what goes on outside the Oryx." At first he hoped that it was only a very severe form of the summer fever, but there is a terror in this death. Ra'ab, the bowels issue with blood, and blue marks like bruises appear on the stomach, as though the body had begun to putrefy before the soul was free. Father spends all day with his scribe searching through the papyri to find a magical ritual, or even a formula of herbs that can be used to protect us. He's trying to make himself believe that the Oryx will be spared, but I think he knows it will come here, or why does he search so desperately? Have you seen Neferank? Yes, and so has Nektva. Neferank says it might take 200 healers to give us full protection, and he has only 10 fully trained. The fear will be worse than the pestilence. Until now, the Oryx has been stronger than fear. but it may break through the barriers we have built against it. Rodan sent Hanuk to the nearest town, where it is raging, and he returned yesterday with terrible stories of what he had seen. The dead are lying unburied in the streets. People who have been struck down are being abandoned by their families and led to die alone. No one was allowed into the temple unless they first stripped off their clothes to prove that the finger marks of Set were not yet on them. Hanuk heard that children are being sacrificed to the river, and the blood of a newborn child had been poured on the road leading into one village he passed through to try to keep out the death. Does Rodin think it will come here? I'm not sure. He's telling his people that it may be sent to test their mastery of fear. Rodin is apt to judge others too much as himself. He thinks his people are strong in their own strengths. He doesn't realize how much it is his own which protects them. We mustn't overjudge our people's strength. Has Father a plan? He's looking for one. He knows that Neferank and the other healers will do everything that's possible, but there are so few of them. Father is still looking to the past, the written past, to find a way. He won't talk about it to me anymore. He thinks I'm too young to understand, but I'm not too young, Raab. I've learned a lot in the past year. I don't wish I were a priest as you do, and I don't want to be a scholar like Father. Perhaps it's because I'm ordinary that I can understand what ordinary people feel. I think Neferank will stop the people who are near him being afraid, even if they have to see the ones they love die terribly. But I'm thinking about the people who won't have anyone to give them courage. Those who are strong in love or who have acquired real bravery will forget about their own danger when they have someone to look after. I suppose there are some who are cowards through their own fault. Perhaps it doesn't really matter what happens to them. It's the people between those extremes I'm thinking of. People who want to be brave but who have to be led into it. You don't call your soldiers cowards, Raab, when they have to be led into battle. In every village there should be someone to show them what to do. It doesn't matter if they're not priests, nor very wise. They must be people who are used to having to do things they'd like to be frightened of, and from whom the others would take orders. You mean the soldiers? Yes, of course. I tried to tell Father about the idea, but he wouldn't listen. He said it wasn't the work of soldiers to nurse the sick. That was for women or priests. Could I persuade Father? She shook her head. No, he'd only think I'd ask you to try to make him change his mind. Once he thinks an idea of mine is nothing will make him believe it's yours too. It is Sebek's turn to command the captains, and he can act without Father's seal. She jumped up. We'll start now, and I'll come with you. We won't tell Father anything about it until everything's arranged. If he'd thought of a better idea, he would be doing something about it, instead of shutting himself up with a lot of old records. Don't you think you'd better stay here, Kias? No, I can make Sebek see that we are right much sooner than you could. He always listens to me. There was such confident authority in her voice that I realized how right Sebek had been in saying that she was much more than a girl of 13. He would listen to her better than he would listen to me, so it was necessary for her to come with me. All right, Kias, we'll both go, and at once. As Royden and Father were both in the north of the Nome, the temple of Nefer-Ankh was near the center. Kias and I went to the largest town in the south. I was still a little bewildered by the speed with which Kias had convinced Sebek. Now her idea had become a reality, and it was only noon of the day following our arrival at the house of the captain. A leader of 150 men had gone to each town, and 5 soldiers were posted to every village. These 5 were under the village headman, but were to report to their captain on the first suspicion that the enemy was within our boundaries. Each captain was to act in conformity with a general plan, so what Kias and I did must have been much the same as what was done all over the Oryx. We went to the overseer of the town and told him all we knew of the pestilence, sparing him nothing that would convince him how necessary it was to prepare every possible weapon against its assault. His house was the largest in town and stood away from the others on the east side. As it was so well suited to our scheme, I told him we should have to take it over, to which he agreed willingly. There were 3 large rooms and 2 smaller ones, as well as a storeroom opening off a large central hall. At the back of the house there were servants' quarters and kitchens, built round their own courtyard, and the surrounding garden was enclosed by a high wall. I told the overseer he could share the house with us, but he said that he had 2 young children and he was afraid to let them remain where they would be in contact with the sick, and with my permission he would take them to his wife's mother, who had a small country estate. He said reluctantly that as soon as he had taken them there he would return to help us. But I saw he was as much afraid of him for himself as for his family, and told him we should have no further need of him after he had seen to the collection of the various things we required. His storerooms were well stocked with both food and wine, and there was an abundance of fruit and vegetables in his garden. Kia said that the sick would need milk more than any other food, so I had a herd of 10 milk cows driven into the field behind the house. Then I sent for bales of coarse linen and a quantity of clean straw to make mattresses that would be burned after use, and a large number of bowls and drinking vessels, so that each person should have his own, which could be broken when he no longer needed it. Nefer-Ankh had told Kias that when Set sends a pestilence, he infects water with his evil power, so we knew that every source at which people drank must be protected. Nefer-Ankh had carefully instructed her in the method of protection. Only certain wells must be used, and these put in charge of one who is pure in heart, preferably a girl under 20 who was born at the full moon. She must suffer no one else to draw water, so that if the community is large, there should be 2 girls in charge of each well. Her hands and feet must be washed morning and evening in raw wine, and each day she must wear a fresh tunic of white linen, which has bleached for 6 hours in the sun. She must eat only well-baked bread and fruit with the skin, which she herself removes, and she must drink nothing but wine or water she has drawn. Only new water jugs must be brought within 10 paces of the well. Not must any unclean person approach within 20 paces, or animal within 30. Fever demons sent by Set may also assume the form of flies, mice, or bats. So food and water, and as far as possible dwelling houses and outbuildings as well, must be protected from their contamination. This order was proclaimed in every street and in the marketplace at dawn, noon and sunset. Yet though Nefer-Ankh had told us that such laws must help to guard us against Set, he had said that we must expect some of our people to be afflicted by the evil onslaught. So it was also proclaimed that any who took the new sickness must immediately notify me, and those who could not be properly cared for in their homes should be brought to the overseer's house, where they would be tended by every means in the power of the oryx. Okay, I finished this here because it's getting a little bit dark, and it is quite a long chapter. Okay, have a good evening. Today is the 22nd of August 2023, and it's hot.